So what I'd like to do is we're going to invite Steve Pawlowski and Florian Goodner to join the panel, and we'll have the remaining time of the session here we can use to ask questions, because we have a lot of interesting thoughts coming out of these two presentations. So there'll be somebody walking around with a mic, and if you would like to kick off, you can certainly raise your hand if you have a specific question. Anybody like? Yeah, go ahead, please. We have a mic over here.
My question's for Rocky. I was curious, you talked a lot about going after, the low-hanging fruit and some of the easy wins and efficiency. Have you since tried to jump the curve and get predictive and preventative with, the analytics and the data that you're collecting?
Not yet. That's the whole purpose of that iSmart box. We're trying to get better sensor data. Those sensors are going to be on the spindles, not just on the machine tool itself. So once we can actually start measuring vibrations and harmonics in that spindle and temperature variations, then that's when we're going to start looking at predictive maintenance on the machines, to where you can say, yes, this machine has been in cycle for 2,000 hours. It's time now for a check or a rebuild or whatnot. Ultimately, what we want to do is have this to where a customer can buy our machine tool. We can have that analytics running. We can predict when there might be a failure and can send a spindle without them even having to lose any downtime. That spindle be there, or whatever part of that machine tool might fail based on some of this stuff. So that's the progression of this smart box, but no, we have not done it with anything currently, but we are planning to do that in the very near future.
Thank you.
Follow up on that. What are you doing on the quality side? Are you collecting any inspection data or metrics on the inspection side?
As far as all of the parts that are manufactured go through a pretty stringent quality check. The machines periodically have checks that we do. Typically every 6 months we'll pull a machine out, do a quality inspection. But yes, we will be able to link that to an event. If an event happens, whether it be an overload condition or a crash or something, then that will obviously trigger a response that will be via email through this system triggered to our maintenance department, where they will come, check the machine out, they'll do a full check on that machine. So yes, we are getting into some of that right now as well.
Perfect. Mitch? Mitch? Okay.
Keith, do you envision a scenario whereby you'll actually use the functionality by using it for an incremental revenue stream for your customers, meaning you'll charge them monthly for that monitoring? Or I get how you utilize it as a competitive advantage, you sell more equipment, but realistically, do you ever envision an incremental revenue stream by charging monthly your customers?
Yeah, I think so. We've talked to customers about. These are on trial right now, so we've talked to customers about that, and I think they are willing to pay for it. I'm just not sure exactly how much. The service is pretty affordable, that we have to pay GE, and then we kind of on top of that. So I think where it really starts to become a revenue builder is when I start tying in other pieces of equipment to it, which will give our field service some revenue to install those sensors and bring them to the data collection box, probably something very similar to what they're doing. And then I can charge for a whole rig package. So I also see it as a revenue stream for installing it on our competitors' equipment. Unfortunately, there just aren't as many data points to monitor. So yes, I see it that way. I'm just not sure. I'm not sure how long it takes in order to develop the platform where the customer sees it really being useful. So we may have to gather some data and make some assumptions before we can charge a lot for it.
Could maybe we have Rocky speak to that particular point as well, because of the issue of providing services to your customers who maybe have a heterogeneous machinery in their plants, so that, what's the vision for Mazak going forward to deploy, more iSmart devices into other manufacturing facilities, and how do you envision getting service revenues with regard to that?
Certainly, most, if not all, the equipment we manufacture currently have a sensor package on board already, so that's primarily available. And with the advent of this new smart box, then it makes it very easy to integrate that in if they want to look at just sensors. If they want this type of predictive maintenance that is going to be offered, then it's a very simple add-on to the existing machines that they're going to be buying, as well as any legacy type machines that they have in their facility. So there is a market there. And since this technology is just new to us, it's been installed for 3 months. We've not brought it to market yet for sale, but that's going to be coming in the next coming months, I'm sure, because there's such a demand for that. Price points and all that's being worked out now on what that's going to cost for the switch and how to configure all that to offer that on our price list to customers. So yes, that will be coming.
Okay. Did anybody else want to speak to Florian? Do you have any comment on that? From the European market, what you see?
We see that this is one of the easy parts to put a price tag on, because you can calculate the amount of money that's saved. An example that came to my mind is the offshore wind turbines that were set up. We have them in the North and the Baltic Sea. They fail, and typically the people that go there for maintenance, and they go there because it's broken, and they don't really know what equipment is up there. So it's rather frequent. They hire the ship. It costs hundreds of thousands. They drive out. It's a one-day effort for, I think, 10, 15 people. One climbs up, and in the gondola he figures out, oh, wrong tools, wrong equipment. Next day again. Next day is a storm. So this is one of the things where I think it's quite good and easy to put a price tag on, because you can show direct benefit and direct savings.
Okay. I think we had another question over here.
Keith, when you collect this data, who owns the data in your mind? And have your customers want to claim ownership of that data for the analytics purpose?
Typically, Air Factory, we own the data. The agreement with their software provider is that they do the work, get everything up and running, and then the data, that's why we kept it on site. Because of some complications and security risks on the cloud, we own the data. Now, it's not to say that may not change in the future. With several plants coming on board and starting to use this type technology, I really feel that sharing of data is going to be coming in the very near future. So we're calling it Air Data right now. Headquarters may want to see our data at some point, so they may want to be able to remote in and look at that, or have us transmit that to them at some point. But for now, we consider it Air Data. As far as the software provider's concerned, they look at our data if we ask them to. They have to get into our system, get on our servers, and help us with problems or whatnot. But that's not for public knowledge. They know that, and they're very willing to help when it comes to different problems that we've seen.
But really, in the global drilling application, do you believe it's your data? Do you consider it your ownership of the data?
Yeah, with our agreement with GE and the 3G signal that we take off of that one particular rig, it's our data. And when our customer starts paying for it, or during this trial period, we license it back to them, so they have full use of it. But there's probably other roads we're going to have to cross with information leaving the drill site, and understanding who owns that and the security of that. And again, I think that's one of the reasons we partnered with a big company like GE, so we could be mindful of that and the legal restrictions, and understanding where it's used, and knowing that it's in a secure place in the cloud, rather than having somebody else try to figure out a way to get it off.
And just to add to that, that's a good point. When these smart boxes start getting out in the field and we're doing analytics on customer spindles, then that question will have to be asked: who owns that data? Do we own it, or do the customer own that data? So I'm not real sure how that's going to be solved in the coming months when these boxes are starting to go out.
Or the spindle provider. But Steve, would you like to add something for that? Because you have probably a bigger perspective with other customers in addition to global drilling support.
Yeah, thanks. So, we've got a fairly large number of customers using this technology, using the same technology that we're using with Keith and global drilling support. And then GE actually uses the same types of technology to monitor the fleets of assets that we've sold to customers, whether they be locomotives or gas turbines or jet engines. And so it is a place, data ownership is a big deal. In the relationship we've built where we're delivering this equipment insight remote monitoring as a service, we've said, look, we're the service provider, we're going to keep the system up and running. People like Keith have the intellectual property on the assets that they're manufacturing, that they're monitoring, or even if it's a third party, right? They know what the data is, and it's their analytics and it's their data. So our terms of services clearly say that data is theirs. We have limited use rights in terms of just understanding at sort of gross levels how much data is flowing, so we can do performance optimization and that kind of thing. When we do service contracts with our customers, it may be a different story. So we have businesses where we're doing monitoring services on all kinds of different rotating assets in the oil and gas and mining space. That's a business called the IDI business. It's in Lisle, Illinois. It's part of GE Digital. And then there are other asset businesses. So we have a big R&D center in Atlanta where we monitor about 2,500 heavy-duty gas turbines that are out in the utility space. And in that case, it's really, we've got a long-term service agreement with that customer. We basically say we have to collect that data to be able to deliver on the performance guarantees that they need. And so we retain ownership of that data, I believe, that we're collecting for those particular use cases. Because really, we're going to get the value. We look at the data in those cases across the fleets of assets and can start to build analytics that help us improve the performance and reliability of each of the members of the fleet.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Do we have another question? Maybe we have another one over here.
So I do have a more general question when it comes to the expression IIoT, because what I saw from the reports and your presentations, these are more, I would say, using technologies we have since a long time in place, like sensors and quality data, process data, and share them among a web network and so on. So we have this with the manufacturing execution system since years, and what is not a bad thing, but I want to understand what is coming new from the IIoT, or do you, or is this just another, let's say, label, another expression of technologies and infrastructure we had since quite some years?
Well, who would like to field that question? Maybe I'll leave it to.
I think the answers are different, right? I think
I think they're going to
be. As an in-plant use is different. I think the enabling someone like Keith to do data collection from assets around the world really, I think, is in that sort of spirit of how do we take that sort of convergence of telecommunications, technology, network security, cloud computing, and put the data in both their hands and their customer hands. I think it's sort of along that way. What I'd say Rockies on, as they're getting started here, as they start to put these machines out in the field with connected control systems on there, then I think you start to see the IoT element be deployed. But I don't know if you've got other comments.
Yeah.
Maybe Rocky would like to respond.
Yeah, just from a manufacturing perspective, when we think about machine tools and the purpose of machine tools, when you talk about multitasking machines and machines that can do a lot, they have a lot more capability than what they ever have in the past, that's one thing. But when you start talking about the manufacturing of that and how can you make that process better is where I think we're getting into the Internet of Things, industrial Internet of Things, where we can start looking at that stuff. Yes, that stuff has been around for quite some time, but really starting to use it to make our processes better, to increase capacities and increase utilization, things like that. So you have a very complex machine tool that can do several things, and then look at how you're manufacturing that. There's room for improvement. That's where we're going with this.
Go ahead, Florian, please.
Just want to add, I think I know that these things, those analytics were able in the past, but they weren't employed to large extent. Also because automation was expensive. We have now the ubiquitous computing power. It's nearly everywhere. I mean, your example is good. You use a PLC where your old competitor's product hasn't. So this really adds up, and we are now at a phase, and also when you look back into the usage of industrial PCs in manufacturing, and which the innovation cycle or of end users. Typically, an end user reviews its control strategy every 7 to 8 years. And if you look back to the IPC development over the last years, then you begin to realize we are at a point in time where we do have the control power in the field. And yes, we have significantly more sensors also. And this is something that just gains momentum. And from a European perspective, it adds that many now start to add even more flexibility and come down to the batch size one in terms of manufacturing. This is, from my perspective, the movement that's going on.
For the two examples, who did the integration for the projects? And you're both going to offer this to customers, hopefully sometime soon. But did you look at re-examining the control system, for instance, and how that interacts? Certainly not with Mazak, because that's your controls, but you're using a different controller than the analytic system.
Yeah, I guess you're asking who did the work, how the installation went?
System integrator, or?
Yeah, GE came to site and put their unit online, but we had to do quite a bit of collaboration between the two of us in order to get it configured, get the first one configured correctly, to where our lube oil sensor read lube oil sensor inside of their system. So there wasn't a third party. We did it together. It probably took, I don't know, 40 man hours or something like that, maybe.
It's really all about understanding what what data is available in the control system and putting it in context. I mean, your product is relatively new in the market. You said you've got about 50 of them out in the field. So it wasn't time for a look at a refresh of his control system. They'd effectively just designed it within the past couple of years. So our focus is being able to help a customer with any type of control system, whether it's a custom controller of some sort. If it's got a communications mechanism, we're going to try to help a customer collect the data and put that data into context that's appropriate for their piece of equipment and make that data visible. So, we've got deployment people that partner with our OEM customers. That's really our target, is OEMs, so that we've got that data mapping for his top drives now. It's simple for his people to install the field agent on units on the next 100 units, because that model's been built.
I expect what we'll do going forward, now that the model's built, is we'll install the units whether the customers are intending to use them or not. So they're in the cabinets, and when it's time to turn them on, we turn them on and charge a service. That's the way I envision it going forward.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
So I mean, I think it's a good question about the, both these questions about what's new, right? So I mean, if you got a PLC and you're doing remote telemetry, you got a ton of custom systems integration work in order to be able to pull together systems of systems to get kind of intelligent rig, right? And I'm wondering, how do we really move forward faster to be able to get these things to be either self-discovering or, because the economics of doing that engineering work, seems to me to just scale linearly with the amount of data you want to collect from a rig.
So I'll take a crack at that. I think, GE's a big believer and supporter of OPC-UA. And so, when you start to have standardized protocols where the control systems can start to publish models of data that are available, I mean, that for us is really one of those technologies that dramatically change the cost of deployment in these kinds of systems. But you're right. I mean, today, if Keith's team has to go in, figure out, the 5 sensors they want to collect off the mud pump, or what sensors are available in the CAD engines, or the DrawWorks, there's a fair amount of upfront engineering work. The good thing is, by and large, those types of equipment are used over and over. And so what we end up doing in our environment is we allow Keith's team to build templates for subsets of the assets. So they could do a DrawWorks template that may only have 5 KPIs in it. And so every time they can configure their top drive, they can say, well, the customer's asking us to collect data from mud pump or from a CAD engine of this style, so that they can build templates so that once that engineering work's been done once, they can take advantage of it and deploy it out into the future. But it is a challenge with, CAD, it's some variation of Modbus. You may have to put direct sensors on, and we talk either, hook the sensors into either Bluetooth or into a local remote I/O drop and bring that data back and talk to them as Modbus addresses. There's not a lot of good. The lack of standardization in the sort of industrial space from a protocol perspective does make that a challenge.
But isn't it really just an ROI evaluation in terms of the engineering costs going in, and then how fast they get a payback?
Yeah, it is, and especially if someone like Keith that hopes to make a long-term business out of doing this across many rigs. He can say, all right, am I gonna make money on the first one? Maybe you're not, right? But maybe you'll make money starting on unit 2 or unit 3.
Yeah, there's so many different types of equipment, AC, DC drives. The way I've looked at that in the past is we'd quote the setup and the making that piece of equipment smart on a time and material basis with our customers. And whether that's cost prohibitive for them, I don't know. A lot of that equipment will never go back to work again. So we may be looking at different types of equipment, AC-driven DrawWorks, that a lot of that sensory is now part of it. So we're talking PLC to PLC. So it just depends on the project, I guess. But yeah, we have to be very careful getting into a science project like that with our customers, and we would never see the return on it.
Rocky, would you like to talk to that point as well, or are you? Oh, okay. Any other questions?
Was it any more or less difficult to install it on the FANUC machine than it was on the Mazak machine?
No. With the advent of the MT Connect platform, once you have an agent that is speaking the MT language, it's very simple for that software to pick it up. So those signals just had to be configured. You just had to identify what signals were coming from that legacy machine per se, what identified it as an idle time or a machine in cycle or a overload. You just had to identify those, and once that was identified, very simple. So there's not a lot there as far as when it comes to installation. If it's a Mazak machine, it's very straightforward. The software is there, you plug it in, it automatically starts generating the signals. If it's a different type of machine with a different type of controller, once you have the adapter set up, the hardware set up, it's very easy for that MT language to be identified.
Excellent. I think we had another question out here. Thank you.
Since you were using the Cisco switch to generate a lot of the reports, during that development, did they mention anything about their fog computing initiative?
Good question.
That is still being developed, actually. This is a work in progress. We've been working with this switch now for about 3 months. And I'm not aware of that, but there may very well be some of our applications engineers that are working with Cisco developing that. This is just a very simple dashboard to look at results coming off those. So I'm sure that as we're developing this, there's going to be some more language to that, I guess. And the fog, I'm not familiar with that, but nonetheless, I'm sure that that's something, if it's a useful aspect of that, then that will be something that's going to be offered with it.
I don't know if anyone on the panel would like to talk to the point of the fog computing or, okay. Any more questions from the audience? Yeah, here we go.
Rocky, when you installed this new system, did you get any pushback from your operators about Big Brother watching them and that kind of thing?
Certainly, that's why we put the 60-inch monitors up. No, really, that was a concern, obviously, from a management standpoint, thinking that Big Brother was watching them. But when you have the 60-inch monitors out there, there's interaction with the operators. It's actually a great tool for them to use. And a lot of times, if there was a maintenance issue or if there was some kind of problem that the operators had, and the communication between an operator to a lead man to a supervisor, et cetera, sometimes priorities aren't set. And this is a way for the operators now to go in and say, hey, I told you so. I told you that machine was set, or I was having trouble with this, and you can make a simple change. So they're getting that buy-in, I think, by having the visualization and having the input of saying what's going on the machine tools. But that was a concern early on with 60-inch monitors and the HMIs throughout the shop. That's a very good point of reference for the operators to use as a tool for them to be able to convey what's actually going on the machine tool floor. And we've seen that. The operators, I don't think, want to do a bad job. I don't think there's any operators that come in and want to do a bad job. They just didn't have the tools to do a good job.
Great.
Quickly want to comment on that as well from the European perspective, because the whole continent is slightly more concerned about privacy of data than it is here in US. This means if you have a lot of data created on the plant floor, you quickly run into problems, legal problems, and you run into discussions with the unions, with strong labor unions. I know examples where they collected energy data out of machines, and they could afterwards determine if the operator of the machine was going for a smoke break or using the bathroom. That had big issues, so you need to be really careful how to handle the data, and that probably also traces back to who owns the data afterwards, because you don't want someone else to have that visibility into your plant, into your employees on the plant floor.
Oh, interesting perspective. Thank you. Any further questions, or actually, I just had one question. I think it was for Keith, and because I was listening to your presentation, you were talking about warranties and the associated cost of providing a warranty. Do you envision? Have you done any analysis in terms of your business? How much it lowers your warranty cost in terms of your business by providing this remote monitoring and evaluating how the customers are using the equipment in the field?
Yeah, I don't know we're far enough along to really tell you any dollars and cents, but I can tell you it sure brings to fruition warranty claim pretty quickly when you're able to come in and look at that information rather than sending a technician halfway around the world to meet a roughneck on the rig floor who said that all the problems started happening after they dropped the machine or whatever the case may be. So with the G sensors or the vibration, you can say, well, what happened on this day? And that's likely the cause of the problem, and you were operating outside the parameters. So much the same as when you bring your cell phone in and they ask you if it's been near the water, and you say no, and they flip the back open, they have a little tab in there that's turned color or something. You know, very quickly they can say, well, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that they're not going to give you a new cell phone. So
Okay.
that's the way we've explained it to our customers.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, is there any further questions? Or, oh, great, excellent. Could everybody hear that question? Could you repeat that, please? I'm sorry, you weren't
The predicts, how is it priced? Is it per install, or is it annualized, or it is project based? And how does that work?
It's it's grouped in packages, and it's a subscription base. So again, it's similar to like a cell phone subscription. We have 0 to 10 or 20 units. It's X amount a month, and you get a larger volume. It gets much cheaper, but it's pretty affordable. It's a price that I feel like we can pass through to our customer and make a little bit of money on.
No, I mean, our goal here is to take this technology that we built and used inside the company and make it available to as many customers as possible. And so we've tried to, we've eliminated all of the upfront. I started this business about 3 years ago, and at the time, when you walked into an AT&T store, right, you walked out with a free cell phone and a contract. And we actually modeled the concept on that, where we knew OEMs are very cost conscious. This was new space for them. They're not sure necessarily how they're going to make money at this, so we took the risk and basically financed the equipment, the installation, and the servers and everything, and allow them to spread the cost over time, which is how we expect them to get benefit. Right? They're going to get benefit over time, so we align the cost with the benefit to make the technology as available to as many people as possible.
All right, great. Thank you very much. Any other questions from the audience? All right, if there aren't any other questions, I want to thank our speakers and our panelists very much for this great speaking opportunity.